This video is a complete tutorial of the Gsender control software that runs your CNC router to make those amazing CNC projects. By the time you're done with this video, you're going to know how to work with Gsender. Let's go. idcwoodcraft.com. I'm Garrett Fromme, CEO of IDC Woodcraft. IDC Woodcraft is the company that provides you and other CNC creators with premium CNC router bits so that you can carve your amazing projects and they look as good as you want them to look. This video is a deep dive into the Gsender software so that you, as maybe a beginner, understands how the software works and how to use it. First of all, what is Gsender? Gsender is control software that runs your CNC router. When it comes to CNC routing, there are several steps that you have to go through. Number one, you have to design your project. Then number two, generate the tool paths. And then finally, you have to generate something called G-code. G-code is the set of instructions that tells your CNC router where it's supposed to move to and when. When your design is done and you've run the tool paths and you generated a G-code, you need something to process that G-code. And that's what Gsender is. It's control software that controls your CNC router, and it's going to work with that code and send it to the machine as the machine needs it. This is what Gsender is. It is not design software. It just runs your CNC router. It is also your interface with your machine where you can manually move the machine around, pause it, stop it, restart it, do all kinds of things, and of course, run your CNC project. Now, this video is a deep dive into this, so it's a little lengthy, but by the time you're done with this video, you are going to know what Gsender does, how it works, all the features in it, and you're just going to know everything there is to know about Gsender. So sit back, have a cup of coffee, and you and I are going to hang around for a little while, but you're going to be an expert at Gsender by the time we're done. Gsender is one that I recommend. First of all, it is written by a company called CNC Labs. That's the company that makes the Longmill CNC router that I have right here. And it is constantly being updated, so it is the most current control software out there. So if you've got a CNC router, you may want to try Gsender, because most of the other ones, they write them and then they forget them, and most of the time they're limited. The Gsender software has lots of extra features in it that most control software doesn't have. The other benefit is it's free to you. So I'll put a link down in the description of this video where you can download Gsender. So with that being said, let's dive into the Gsender control software. I'm going to give you the lay of the land, how the real estate is laid out, and then we're going to dive into all the basic elements that you're going to be working with 99% of the time, and then we're going to dive into some of the deeper features that you're going to want to know that's there. Now, this is what the Gsender control software is going to look like when you launch it. So let's take a look at the lay of the land here. First of all, in the upper left, the very upper corner, it says Gsender 1.4.4. That is the version number of the software. If there is a higher version, then yours is going to say a higher version when you load it. If the version has been updated after you loaded the software, down at the lower left corner, a little window is going to open up where it's going to tell you that it's been updated and you can download the update and run it. Just below that is a little green check, and next it says connected, and for me it says COM4. Yours may say COM3 or COM5. Now, if it does not say connected, then it's going to say connect to machine. When you plug in your CNC router into your computer and you launch Gsender, it should connect automatically. This is one of the benefits of Gsender. You don't have to deal with any of the back-end stuff, configuring COM ports and things like that. Gsender automatically detects where your CNC router is and connects right to it the minute you launch it, so long as your CNC router is plugged in and turned on. If you are not connected, you simply come up to this black window and hover over it, and it's going to open up, and down below it's going to be have a little text there. It may say COM3, COM4, COM5. Simply click that and you're going to see that it will say connected. Across that black band over to the upper right, there are several icons, and it says surfacing, calibrate, firmware, help, and there's a little gear. These are all the little features that you are going to use to set up your Gsender software or configure it in different ways, which you're not going to really have to do. Just below that, it says workspace. This is an area that we are not going to worry about right now because that's more advanced. Just leave it alone, let it do what it's supposed to do. And I got another video that explains what this is, so I will link that video down below. As you come back across, there's a word location, and next to that is a little slider button that says lightweight mode, and it defaults off. You know if it's off or on if it's got the blue next to the little button or gray. When it's gray, that light mode is off. I never touch light mode. It's simply a feature that takes some of the features of Gsender and turns them off in case you don't have a very powerful computer. But Gsender does work with most computers, as even cheap old ones that don't run very well. First of all, the big white area with a Z right in the middle. If you look in the upper left corner, it says Visualizer. This is the area where you're actually going to be seeing what your CNC router is going to do. In the upper right of that, it says idle. This is just an indicator. Basically, the visualizer is going to show you the tool path that the CNC router bit is going to be running on. Now, let me show you what I mean. I'm simply going to load a program real quick. And we can see there's a bunch of black lines, and it says Van Crafton, number 11, 1999, 2002. This is the path that your router bit is going to follow when it's carving on your CNC project. We'll come back to that in a minute. I'm going to unload that program. Down below in the lower right, there's a little box with different sides, or a cube. When you hover over that, those cube areas glow green, and then they go back to white when you're not hovering over it. That is to give you different orientations of the view that you're looking at in the visualizer. We should load that program back up just so you see what I mean. So right now we're looking at it in an isometric view. Now if you look at this little cube, there's a little green triangle right in the middle of it. That green triangle is showing that we are looking at it isometrically. But if we go to the top of the triangle and you hover over that, the little icon comes up, it says top. When I click that, it's going to shift our perspective, and now we're looking directly down on our CNC router. And likewise, if I hit the button on the left, it's going to say front, and I hit the side of the cube on the right, it's going to change the orientation. We're looking at the CNC router project from the side. What you want to do is come back and just click the little green tiny triangle, and that'll give you the right perspective that you want to see. Now I'm going to unload this program again, and we're going to come back to that in just a minute. So that's the visualizer area. The next important area is the location. This is in the upper right corner. It says location, and it has a big X, Y, and Z, and it's got some numbers next to it, and then some other buttons. Now these numbers, you're going to see two sets of numbers. In this case, we have 11.870 for the X, and then it says 000 underneath it, a little gray number. Now the gray numbers, if you don't have a homing sequence or homing sensors for your CNC router, then don't worry about those numbers. These are for machines that have a homing sequence. Those are the machine home numbers. You are going to worry about the bigger numbers. Those are the ones that tell you where your CNC router is at any given time. And it also sets what's called your zero values. So what I mean by zero values is when you design the CNC project, you've got a corner that you're using to reference, or some position on here that we call X, Y, Z, 0. In this case, we're just going to say the lower left corner of this board. That would be the 0 reference. Those numbers next to the buttons are going to indicate where your router bit is relative to that 0 point. So if it's 11 inches over, then that's going to be approximately right here on the board, and that's where your CNC router would be. We'll dive deeper into this one in just a minute. We want to drop down to the Jog Control, which is in the middle right of the display. And this is where you manually move your CNC router around. You'll see there's a Y plus, Y minus, X plus, Z minus, and there's a big stop sign in the middle and these little buttons that go off diagonally. These buttons are simply going to move your CNC router in that direction, the X minus, Y minus, X plus, Y, X minus, and Z plus, Z minus. And then you can also control the speed with these rapid, normal, and precise buttons. So I'll just demonstrate quickly. We're going to click the minus X button, and if you watch the CNC router, it's going to move to the left. And if I click X plus, it's going to move to the right. If I click Y plus, it's moving away from me. Y minus, it comes toward me. And Z plus goes up and Z minus goes down. Now, to give you an idea of what these speed buttons are, we're going to go down to the precise button, and I'm going to move X again. And you're going to see that X is now moving very slowly. What this does, it gives you the control of jogging so that you don't move it so fast that you run into something, because we don't want to run into anything with a router bit sitting in the machine. This whole area is designed to get your CNC router bit into position or out of position so that you can work with your project. Now, down below that, there's a series of boxes here. One says X, Y move in inches, and Z move in inches, and the speed inches per minute. So these are the various settings for each one of these buttons over here that set your speed. You notice when I hit the normal, the X, Y, and the Z change, and so does the speed. We'll take a look again. We're going to zoom into the X, Y. I'm going to change that from normal to rapid, and you see that now we are, it's set so it's going to move at 0.787 inches every time I click these buttons. Now, here's the other feature about this buttons with the Jog Control. You can hold them down and the machine is going to move. I'm going to hold the X minus button down, and so long as I'm holding it down, the machine is moving. I'm going to hold it to the right and the machine is moving. But we can jog it incrementally. So right now, the XY says 0.787. When I click the X once, the machine moves only a 0.787 of an inch. Just like that. So those are the two ways that you can move your CNC router. You can just click the button and it'll move incrementally, or you can just keep it moving until you let go of the button. Now we're going to drop down to the lower right area. This has several tabs on it. It says probe, macros, console, and coolant. Most of the time you will use the probe feature, but I'm going to cover the other two real quick. The last one is coolant. The coolant is when you are cutting metal generally, or some other material that requires coolant. You will almost never use this feature on CNC routers. Then you have the console. The console is where you can see where the G code is being generated and read. In the upper right corner of that black box, there's an expansion window. When I click that, then we should be able to see that console display pop in, and we can do a number of things in the console. We can watch the G code that's being generated, or we can manually insert G code to have our CNC router do certain things. For example, I'm going to type in G28 X0 Y0, and when I click the run button, the CNC router is going to move to its respective X0 and Y0 positions, and there it goes. But I'm going to stop it because we don't want to use that. But you'll notice that when I stop that, I now got an alarm because I interrupted the G code cycle. To fix that, we simply click this little unlock button that was on there, and we will be ready to go. Macros is where you can actually create your own little micro G-code programs to have your CNC router do different things. For example, we have one here that I have written, and it says go to start point. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to set some start points. I'm going to come up to location and set those to 0 because I just want to make those 0. Now I'm going to move the machine out of position. And then when I click this macro, it's going to tell it to go to XY0. And I click that, and it's going to some other position, so I got to take a look at it. Now I stopped it, and you see I got this alarm again. It's an alarm 3. So sometimes you may see this alarm feature pop up, and you're not sure what it is. I've got a list, a alarm code list that tells you what each alarm code is. In this case, we just interrupted the cycle. But if you want that list down below in the description, there's a download link for the alarm code list. I suggest that you get it because you will get alarms from time to time and you're not going to understand what they are. I'm going to stop for a moment. If this video is helping you out, giving you an idea of the Gsender software, if you would please just take a moment and hit that little thumbs up button that's just below this video. That tells me that I'm giving you some information, helping you understand the Gsender control software. And I'd love to see a comment down below, questions that you might have about Gsender, something I missed, or some other things that Gsender can be used for if you're more advanced and understand the Gsender control software. So give me a thumbs up and a comment down below. Also subscribe to the channel because here at IDC Woodcraft, I teach you all things CNC from the basics for beginners all the way up to advanced expert. We're going to come over and simply click this button. It says click to unlock machine, and that's what I do. And then I'd have to go look at this little macro to see what's wrong, and the way you do that is by clicking the three dots. I have opportunity to edit it, and then I can go in here and check it out, and I can see what my problem is. I have a G59 in that command, and that tells it to do something that I forgot that it was to do. So you can write your macros at any time. And these are really beneficial if your project gets done and your CNC router is hanging over the project and you're ready to clean it up or do some sanding while it's on your machine. You can run a macro to tell the machine to move out of the way. So that's the benefit of macros. And there's lots of other things you can do, but that's when you understand G-code. Otherwise, don't worry about it right now. So that's the lay of the land of the Gsender software. Now, one of the things you may run into, if you are working in inches and you're looking at these blue numbers here, they may be 2 decimal places. If it's running in 2 decimal places, and what's happening is the software is reporting back in metric. Basically, it's showing in millimeters. So you need to change that. And here's how you change that. You want to go into, first of all, the gear icon. Now the gear icon is going to have a bunch of settings in it. And we're going to take care of the metric settings, and then we're going to go into this gear icon and talk about all of the various tools that are in that. But I'll do that in a little while. So when you hit the gear icon, you come to this general screen. And down in the mid section of this general screen, there's going to be a little area that says workspace. And you can select inches or millimeters. And if you're in inches, then of course select inches. If you're in millimeters, select millimeters. When you do that, a little thing is going to pop up and says that your system has been updated. I'm going to go to inches, and if you look at the lower left corner, it says that settings have been updated. So that's telling me that the inches are now valid, but there is one more thing we have to do. That's not going to change these numbers right here. What we need to do is go into firmware. So when you click firmware, you're going to get this firmware tool window pop up, and there's going to be a lot of numbers off to the right or off to the left. And what we want to do is find number 13. And it may say report, it'll say report in inches. And if it says disabled, then you will need to enable it. And then, well, first I got to reset this. Yes. Okay, so I've disabled it, which means it's going to report back in millimeters. Those numbers, this is what's generating those numbers in 2 decimal places. So click the disable button, so it's enabled, and it's going to turn yellow, and you're going to have an exclamation point there and a little arrow. That little arrow is saying we're going to reset to default, and the default was disabled, but we don't want to do that. Then you'll come down to the bottom right and click apply new settings. And that has now been updated, but I'm going to disable that by clicking the reset button and saying yes. And then we are going to close that. And now you're going to see that this is now reporting in 2 decimal places. That we don't want. We want 3 decimal places. We're going to go back to firmware, go down to number 13, and report in inches, and then go down and apply the settings. So now we're ready to go. So let's talk about the main features you're going to work with, which is the visualizer and the buttons. So what we want to do is bring a G-code file in, and here's how we do that. We're going to go to the visualizer. In the lower left corner, there is load the file. button, and there's a little arrow box next to that. When you click the arrow box, it's going to display the last 5 files that you have loaded into your Gsender software. But we don't want that. We are going to use the other feature, which is load the file. So I'm going to click the arrow to close that menu and then simply click load file. And I'm going to scroll down. Well, then you want to go to whatever directory that your file has been stored in, and mine is in the downloads directory. We're going to go back to Vancraft and click that and click open. And there it is. We're ready to go with the file. Now the first thing we want to do is make sure the G code is actually going to work. So there's a feature in Vectric that you push, it's going to read the G code and it'll return an error if there's something wrong in the code. And that's the first thing you want to do. So that is down here in the second or third blue button, says verified job. When you click that, it's basically going to cycle through. You see this little router bit running through this whole thing, but the machine is not running. So basically what this is doing is running the G code, but it's not actually running the machine. And this is letting me know that the whole project is verified when it completed, so we're in good shape. Now we need to set up our location of our project. So we have this, this board here, and I'm going to just set it on the machine. What I want to do is jog the CNC router over to the lower left corner of the project. Vancraft is at the lower left corner. If you're working with your design software, you can select anywhere to be your reference point, your XY0 point. I'm setting at the lower left corner, so I'm going to set up Gsender in Rapid, and I'm going to move the X and Y at the same time. So we've got this little diagonal button here. This is going to move the machine to the right and toward me. And when I hold it, we are running Rapid, and that's exactly what it's doing. And I'm going to get a better position on it, move the Z down, and then I can go to the precise setting and simply move it around. And we can see that now we are moving the machine to precise locations. Now, how do you set the Z value? Well, there's 2 ways you can do it. Number one is you can eyeball it. You can nurse the Z down with your router bit in it until it just touches the project material. I like to put a little piece of paper under it and wiggle it around until the piece of paper stops. Then we can set our 0. The other way you can do that is by using the probe, which I'll get to in just a moment. So in this case, we're simply going to use the Z value, and I'm going to drive it down, and I'm going to hold it until it gets close, and then we are simply going to nurse the Z down a little bit. Now, I'm not going to set this precisely right now for sake of this video, but let's assume that we've got this positioned manually the way we just did it. What we want to do at this point is now we're going to set our 0 point. So what you come up to the location area, select the 0x button and click it, and now you're going to see that this number here went to 0. Y is going to 0, Z is 0, and now our 0 reference point is set. We're ready to go by setting the 0 points manually. Now I'm going to show you a cool little feature if you want to do this. These numbers here, you can change these numbers. Let's just say an inch off in the X, or I just want it to be an inch away from this corner of this project. Then I can simply type in 1 inch and hit enter, and there, now I've just changed my Z value by 1 inch, or my X value. So now I've created basically a new 0 point, but I want to go back to 0 on that. Now we're going to move this out of the way. I'm going to bring the Z up, because you never want to move the machine with the Z, the bit touching the project. So we raise that up, and I'm just going to move the machine out of the way a little bit. And now we're going to use these other buttons here. First of all, we've got this 0 all button. What that'll do is, instead of hitting each X, Y, and Z buttons to 0 things out, I can hit the 0 all, and everything will be zeroed out. And I'll show you. Just watch the X, Y, and Z buttons. I click the numbers, and then I click 0 all, and now all of them went to 0. Now we're going to move it out of the way just a little bit more. And now it's moved out of the way, I've got this other button here that says Go X 0, Y 0, or XY0. And what that's going to do is it's going to move your CNC router to the XY0 position, but it won't move the Z, because we don't want the Z to go down to 0 position. If there's a piece of material sitting there, you might actually damage the bit or damage your material. So when I click that button, the machine simply goes back to its position. There's another button that says Go To. When I click that, there's a Go To Location. So let's say we want it to move back 5 inches. I can simply highlight the Y, type in 5, and it has absolute or relative. And what that means is absolute is from the 0 point, relative is from the position that the CNC router is at right now. So we're going to go absolute. It's going to move 5 inches in the back backwards. I'm going to click it, and there goes the machine. And that just gives us a little extra control of just moving the machine around. It's a nice little feature. I don't use it very much. Matter of fact, I don't think I've used it at all. But so that you know that it's there. We're going to close that menu out. And there's finally these blue buttons here. These little blue buttons next to the 0x, 0y, and 0z. You can move each axis independently if you want. So we're going to put it out of position again, and I'm going to go up to the Go To X0 or 0x. When I click that, it's going to move the x-axis to the 0 position. When I click the Go To Y0, then it's going to go to the Y0 position. So these are some of the manual features that you have and the setting features that you have. Let's talk about the actual project, the visualizer area. In the visualizer area, we've got this Van Crafton thing with this file that we've loaded up. And we verified the job by clicking Verify Job. But let's just say we got the wrong file in there. You can simply come down to Load File, click the X button, and it'll give you the option to unload that G-code. I don't want to do that. I'm going to leave it there. But we'll just do it real quick just so you see. I'm going to say yes, and it got rid of the G-code. And if I did a mistake by taking that out, I can simply click that little arrow and come back in and hit the first one that was there. That's the most recent file. It'll reload it. Now we want to do the outline. So you want to make sure your router bit is not going to run off your material or hit a clamp. And so this is the nice aspect of outline. What outline will do is it'll find the furthest most points of your G-code, and it's simply going to move your CNC router around those furthest most points. So when I click this outline mode, the router is going to move around. And now it is basically going around the profile that would be created by this Van Crafton sign. And I can watch it to make sure that nothing is going to be in the way of where that router bit is going to be. And if we're all good, then we can go with our program. And then it has come back and returned to home. That's what the outline feature is good for. You definitely want to run that outline feature before you run any jobs, because if you have a clamp in the way, then you could have some problem. And finally, there's going to be the start job. And when I hit that, then the CNC router is going to take off and do its stuff. But I want to show you the probing section of this, because you may use a probe. And what a probe is, it's your tool setter. The probe actually manually sets your CNC router bit. So in order to make this work, I've got to clamp this piece down, and then I've got to change the router bit, because probes generally only work with straight bits. What I have in here right now is a V bit. So we're going to take care of that, and I'll be right back. Before we get back into the Gsender software, IDC Woodcraft is a CNC router bit company. And if you're looking to figure out what CNC router bit you need, especially if you are a brand new beginner, you may want to take a look at the complete starter set. This is the only starter set that's available out there that has everything that you need to get started, that'll cover almost all your first designs. So this whole package is not only just CNC router bits, but you also get 7 different projects with it and instructions. So basically it's your own little tutorial system that you'll get when you get the CNC router bit starter set. You can get the truly complete CNC router bit starter set by clicking the link down in the description. And with that, let's get back into the Gsender software. Give me that like, a comment down below, subscribe to the channel, and let's keep on learning. So I've changed the CNC router bit, and now we're going to use the touch plate. And what this plate is going to do, it's going to set the XY0 point right there on the corner. And what we'll do is we'll take this little edge and we'll just set it in there, and we will take the magnet and touch it to attach it to the spindle. Now I need to move this down. This needs to be relatively close, within 1/4 of an inch of the plate. And we also want to move it over to this circle that's on the plate right there, because the Gsender software, when we set the 0, it's programmed based on that center point. So you simply want to just move that over into that area, and we should be good. And we want to move the Z down. Now when you move Z down, you never want to have your plate in the way. So I'm going to move it out of the way, and we're going to just move our machine down a little bit, and we should be good to go right there. I got some room to play with. So we're going to get back into the Gsender software, and we're going to go to the probe feature. You're going to use a probe feature all the time. Now we're going to set X, Y, and Z. If you just want to set Z, then you're going to click this little button right here. And what the project is, or what the machine is going to do, is just going to move down, touch that plate, and zero out your Z location right there. In fact, we will do that first. So we're highlighted on Z, and you know that because it's got the dark blue. If we were on X, Y, Z, then that would be dark blue. This little window would pop up as well. I'm going to go back to Z. And we're going to click the button probe, and when you click probe, we have this red light here, and there's a little button there that we can't press right now. And the reason that came up is we have to make sure that the machine is going to see that probe. In other words, we got the magnet on there. When this touches, it's going to make contact, and it's going to trigger a circuit. And so we want to make sure that that circuit is going to trigger. So I'm simply going to touch that to it, and the little button turned green while I'm holding it. And you can see that the start probe button is now highlighted. I'm going to click that, and the probe cycle will start for Z. And you'll see the machine moving down, and now after a second run, it is now set the Z. But let's say we want to set X, Y, and Z. Then what we want to do with that is we want to come back in and change this value to X, Y, Z. We click that, and this window pops up, and a little visual right there. Now, in this window, it says tool 0.25 inch. And the problem is I've got a 3/16 inch bit in here. This is indicating the diameter of the bit. So I have to see if there's a 3/16 inch bit in here. And the way I do that is by clicking that little down arrow, and it's going to check with all the defaults that are preset into it. So 3/16 is not in here. So we need to put in the proper number. You can select whatever diameter you want here, but we need the proper number, so I'm simply going to enter 0.1875. And that has offered me to create a 0.1875 diameter bit. I'm going to click that create, and now we're ready to go. And what that's going to do is tell the software that we are working with a certain diameter tool. Since it's automatically set in at 0, and needs to know the diameter so it can take account for the diameter of the bit. So now we're going to click the probe button and repeat the process. We're going to touch the probe to the bit, get a green light, and it's going to give us the option to go. At this point, we're going to hit the go button, and you're going to watch the Z value get set, and it's going to move over to the side, set the X value, and come in and touch twice, and then it's going to come forward and do the Y. Probes are awesome. They make it very, very easy. And that's basically how you work with the probe feature in the Gsender software. At this point, once your project is ready to go, you get back into Gsender and you click the start button. But there's one more thing I want to show you, and that's this lower area down here and everything that's in here. Now, when we first opened up Gsender, this is all blank, but now we've got some numbers. You will rarely ever use these numbers as a reference. But just above that, to the left, is the name of the file. Now, we're not going to start job on this project because I've already carved it. But we want to cover this bottom area down here. So first of all, we've got to the left, it's got the name of the file and the file size. So this is van_1, van G-code. And then we have this override button. Now when you click this override button, it's going to change this display down below. I'm going to get back to that in just a minute. And then over to the right of this, that has the path. When you hover over these little blue words, it's going to show you the full path name. Now let's get down to the display down here. Most of the time you will not refer to these numbers. As a matter of fact, I never refer to them. What I do refer to is the information that's going to come up when your project starts to run. So you notice there's this overrides button here. When we click that, this whole display changes. And what this is going to display is, number one, this little speedometer looking thing is going to tell you the percent of this thing left, and there's also going to say time remaining. So it's a good little visual indicator. This little slider here changes the default feed rate of your router bits that are set in the machine. So if your router bit is set to 100 inches per minute, then you can change that on the fly by simply moving that slider around. And then you can also incrementally change it with the plus and minus buttons right here, and you can reset it to the default 100%. So I'm going to slide that up, and you can see now we're running at what, 190%. I can click the reset button, and that should move it over to 100, which it just did. That's the basic elements of this Gsender software that you'll be working with. I went a little deep into how the different features work, but there's some other things I just want to show you. This is getting to the more advanced stuff that you want to know. Let's say your CNC router, when you start it up with the Gsender software, and your X is going in the wrong direction from what it's supposed to. That's where we get into the settings and the firmware. But I'm going to show you the settings now, and then we'll get into the firmware. So when we come up to the upper right corner of the page, there's a little gear icon. When you select that, a window is going to pop up that has lots of different things about the software that you can change. So when you open it up, it comes to General. And this is where you can set things like your inches to millimeters, or you can change the precise, normal, and rapid feed rates. These are the same buttons that we have in the Jog Control. And you can change it all you want. When you do, let's just go to rapid. I'm going to change X move to 1.0 and then click, and that is now set. If I don't want that and I want to go back to the default, then I click reset default, and I do that. Windows going to come up. I'm going to confirm it, and that number is now going back to 0.787. I like going to 1 inch, so we're just going to leave it there. There's some other things that we don't need to worry about, like this DRO zeros. I don't mess with that. I don't even know what it is. Now, when you come over to the menu, the settings menu, the next item is safety. Now, what this is showing is at the bottom, it's showing all the alarms that you have experienced. It's just keeping a history of it. And then the movement is safe height mode. So what safe height is where your CNC router should be relative to your XY0 point. You don't normally need to worry about setting it in the Gsender software, but if you want to, you can set it to whatever you want. I'm going to go ahead and set it to 1 inch. Keep my safe height exactly where I want it. So I'm going to say 1.0, and I don't know what it's going to do with that, but I like that number. When we go to the little window that says Workspace, it says, warn if file contains invalid G-code. Well, that sounds really good. If your file isn't scanned first, and it doesn't see an error in the G-code, which does happen from time to time, then your project can be running halfway out, and then all of a sudden it stops and alarms out, 2 hours into the job, and it's because there's something wrong with the G-code. So you want that turned on. I didn't realize I didn't have that turned on. So we're going to switch that on, and then warn if invalid line is detected during the job. We can turn that on, and the final one is warn when setting workspace 0. I don't really need that on. I know when I'm setting workspace 0. And then show the soft limits warning. Now, the soft limits warning is when you have a homing sequence set up on your CNC router with homing switches. Again, I am not going to cover that here. I've got another video that explains all that. I'll link that down below in the description. Let's go down to probe in the menu on the left. From setting safety to probe. Probe is where we can set up all our different elements of the probe movement. I'm not going to dive into this either. I always just use the defaults that are come with the Gsender software. But you can change these here. Next one is spindle or laser. Now this is another feature where if you have a spindle on your machine, now you notice on my CNC router I have a spindle, not a trim router. So this is a feature that I can work with, or when you have the laser attachment. In the Longmill, it's got the laser beam attachment that you can get. In fact, if you're looking into CNC routers, I've done a deep dive review video on the Longmill. I also have like what I call the ultimate buyer's guide, which walks you through everything you need to know about CNC routers so you can avoid things you don't want in CNC routers when you are shopping around, like finding a company that has no customer service. You definitely want customer service. So I'll link that video down below in the description, both videos, the Longmill review and the ultimate buyer's guide. I suggest you watch them if you haven't gotten the CNC router yet. So we're going to move on from there, and then we can come to the visualizer area. And here we can change some things here. You can fiddle with these things as you want just to see what they do. I'm not going to change them around. There's shortcuts. Now these are shortcut keys that you can set. I do not mess with the shortcut keys, but if you like having keyboard shortcuts, and you can set up your own keyboard shortcuts. Then we have job history and stats. Pay attention to that. Program events is an interesting little feature. Program events would be if the program ends, the program starts, you pause the job and restart the job. You can program this machine so it will do certain things. If you're not really familiar with G-code and things like this, then I wouldn't worry about this. But as you get more familiar with things like G-code and what you want your CNC router to do, then you can start working with these program events. But it's a very neat feature. When you look in mine right now, I do have program events. So program start is not enabled. There's nothing in there. At program stop, when I actually stop the job right in the middle of the job, it's going to do certain things. The Z is going to pull up to 1 inch. The machine is going to go to my XY 0 point, and then it's going to turn the spindle off. Now let's say I pause the machine, then there's a little M5 in here. When I pause the program, that M5 is going to engage, and what that's going to do is turn the spindle off, because if I pause it right in the middle of a cut, that spindle is going to be rubbing on the material, and so I don't want it to do that, because that'll wear out your router bit really fast. It'll dump a lot of heat into the router bit because it's rubbing the material. So I have that, and then when I resume that program that I just paused, it's going to turn the spindle back on. It's going to do what we call a dwell. It's going to wait for a minute for the spindle to get up to speed. And then there's some other features like tool change, which we don't have on this machine, rotary, and about the Gsender software. With the settings now, we're going to come over to firmware. Now firmware is where you set the internals of the GRBL control software. And I'm not going to run through this too much, but there are a couple things that you would want to know about. Step direction. Number 3, if your CNC router, as you start, is going in the wrong direction, then this is where you change it. You go into firmware, find the EEPROM number 3, and you simply change the direction of the machine, of the setting, the little switch on there, and then you'll be ready to go. And you'll have the thing run in the right direction. You can see I actually had that. I had to change that. When you see this yellow like that, that means we have to change that value. And there's other things in here that we are not going to cover too much today because this video is getting a little long already. Is there anything else? Now, calibrate. I don't use the calibrate feature, but that helps you square up your machine if you need to square it up. So when you first set up your machine, you want to check to make sure it's square. Then you can use this calibrate feature. And finally, we have the surfacing feature. And the reason that is there is if you need to get your spoil board surfaced, you can use the features in here rather than design your own spoil board program in your design software. So you can play with that as well. I'm not going to dive into that. It's a good tool that's there. and take advantage of it. So with that, we got one more thing to do, and that is to actually run this program. So I don't want this program to actually cut into this project. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the project off, this material off. I want it out of the way. And when you run your CNC router, you want all the stuff off the work surface, so my coffee has to come off. And the only thing you want on there is a router bit and the material. But I don't want those in there right now, so I've got those out of the way, and I've got to move this clamp. And I'm going to run this Van Crafton cycle. And I want to show you what the screen is going to look like while it's running. And we are going to fire it up. Now, I've got my spindle turned off just for noise. Although this is a water-cooled spindle, so it's very quiet. I could actually turn it on, and it probably will, but I don't need to. So what we're going to do is come back in here. We are going to start the job. We have our X, Y, and Z set. We hit the start button, start job, and the machine is going to start doing its stuff. Now, we have two new buttons that come up. One says pause, one says stop job. And in the upper right corner, it says running, and then you look at the project itself, there's a little router bit that's moving around. And that router bit is basically where it's at right now on the machine actually carving. Now at the bottom, it shows what our runtime is so far. And it's 47, 48, 49, 50. And then we have this little speedometer thing that says we are now 2% into our job. We'll move over and we have time remaining, 12 minutes and 7 seconds. And then we can speed it up or slow it down by moving this slider. And now it's moving a lot faster, and I'll bring it over here, and now it's moving a lot slower. And then I can reset that by clicking the reset button, and that is defaulted back to 100%. Then we have the pause button, so we can pause the job, and the stop button. So I'm going to stop the job just to eliminate the noise, and this window comes up. This says job end, close. You can come up and click the close button, and we are now back to the main screen, ready to rock and roll. And that's all I'm going to cover in the Gsender software here, but it gives you the basics of how to work with it. I hope this video gave you some insight into how to work with it and some of the little features that you need to work with. If you like this video, is helpful, give me a thumbs up. Comment down below about some other features you may want to share or something I might have missed. I'm Garrett with IDC Woodcraft. Be sure to stop by idcwoodcraft.com for your CNC router bits, and I'll be waiting for you. Have a great day, better tomorrow, and happy CNCing. idcwoodcraft.com